Hello and welcome to Making the Most of MeLSA. This video is intended for the audience of educational settings who are interested in MeLSA training and what they can do to make the most of MeLSA training. My name is Mary Stanley Duke and I'm an educational psychologist in Bristol and have been leading the MeLSA project with lots of other people contributing for the last couple of years. Over to yourself, Emily.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily Clement. I'm also an educational psychologist. I've been involved with MeLSA in terms of developing and delivering the training as lead trainer, as well as supporting the supervision of our trained MeLSAs in Bristol.
Hi everyone, I'm David Wright. I'm an educational psychologist and I am one of the content creators of MeLSA. I'm also a lead trainer and I have taken a lead in the research side of MeLSA.
We'd like to say a big thank you to Swindon Borough Council who have commissioned this video for sharing in their local authority, and they're happy for it to be shared widely across the UK and maybe beyond.
So during today's session, we will begin with Mary giving us a short overview of what MeLSA is, before then considering some key aspects of MeLSA in a little bit more depth. David will then talk us through the MeLSA training course, including what topics are covered across each day, and we will then spend some time considering who MeLSA training is suitable for. I will also talk through some of the research and evaluation feedback that we've gathered so far to highlight the voice of our trained MeLSAs, before finally highlighting what's available within the programme to support the implementation of MeLSA in your settings.
So firstly, MeLSA in a nutshell. So MeLSA is a 6-day training and supervision programme, and the ultimate aim is to build capacity in schools to support the learning needs of the pupils that are there. The ultimate aim is to develop skilled and independent learners of tomorrow. And MeLSA aims to do this by delivering evidence-based research as part of the training in an accessible and interactive manner to ensure that everybody has a sound understanding of the psychology of learning. A little bit of a sidestep into why the tree. The tree is a visual metaphor for what MeLSA is all about. So in the tree, the fruits are the mastered skills. So those would likely be the skills that you might assess your learners, those summative assessments to see what learners have learned. MeLSA is looking at the buds and the flowers. So those emerging skills which aren't yet fully developed, they're not independent and mastered, but they're showing signs of being there. And what MeLSA does, it spends quite a lot of time thinking about and drawing on research and psychology, what adults can do to support learners to develop these buds and flowers so that they become mastered fruits, as it were, so mastered skills that can be used independently. So some of the key MeLSA knowledge, this sings to Vygotsky, who you most likely know, around that zone of next learning. So on that circle on the left there, in the middle, are the things the learners can do. So those are the mastered skills, those fruits that are on the tree. That zone of proximal development, that zone of next learning or potential development, are the things the learner can do, but with a little bit of help. And what we think about in MeLSA is actually unpicking what does that help look like. And we then turn to another psychologist, Forrestein, who gave us quite a lot of information in his theory around mediating. And his thoughts were that there are 3 things that need to happen to make a learning interaction a mediating interaction. So really helping the learner sort of move on. And that's communicating these 3 things, the 3 W's as we call it. It's what you're learning, so focusing the learner in on what it is they're doing. Helping the learner understand why they're doing it, so giving meaning to the learning, and then helping the learner think, where else could this learning be used in their lives? So that's very sort of, all those 3 things are very bespoke to the learner. And when we talk about where else could those skills be used, we're thinking of that transference of learning from the learning situation into other areas of their lives. So really learning becomes very meaningful to that individual. We then work with our MeLSAs to think about the mediating puzzle, which are the 4 jigsaw puzzle pieces here in the middle. But we also know from research that learning sits within a wider sphere of things. And 2 of these things are the relationship. It's really important that learners feel safe and secure with whoever's supporting them in that learning, because moving into that zone of not being a master at something can be sort of a little bit scary, and you need to feel okay about making mistakes. So we know that relationship is really important. We don't touch on it hugely in MeLSA, but we demonstrate it through the way we deliver the training. At the top there, you can see mindset, which is one of our golden threads along with mediating. And mindset, as you likely know, is around that belief that change is possible and thinking that change is possible as well. So those sit around the outside, and then we think about the mediating that's going on in the middle. So once MeLSA has communicated the 3 W's, the what we're learning, why we're learning it, and where else we can learn it, we're thinking about what mediating could happen. And we take our MeLSAs through each of these jigsaw puzzle pieces, looking at thinking skills. So we ask MeLSAs to explore the thinking skills needed for the task, and then look at the thinking skills that the learner has, and where there's a bit of a mismatch, thinking about interventions and activities they can do to develop the thinking skills needed so they become more mastered and independent. Then we help MeLSAs to think about the content and thinking about making a task more familiar or more interesting, as that might help engage the learner. Then we also encourage our MeLSAs to think about complexity of a task, and that might be making it more concrete or making it easier, so less complex, or it might be about helping them become a bit more familiar with the task. The last one is the language, and we think about the language that we're using, so the words that we're using when we're talking, but also the language in the presentation of the task. That might be verbal, but it might also use pictures, symbols, or diagrams.
So MeLSA involves 6 initial days of training followed by ongoing supervision. The first day provides training on the 2 golden threads of MeLSA, which are mediating and mindset, and these psychological ideas run throughout all of MeLSA. In days 2 and 3 of training, the MeLSAs develop an understanding of thinking skills, explore how we think, understand executive functions, and consider how we process information into memories that we can later recall. Day 4 then takes everything we've learned about mediating, mindset, thinking skills, executive function skills, and memory, and applies these to learning maths. Day 5 then applies these same ideas to learning to read and write. Day 6 then focuses on reviewing the learning from the previous sessions, and then considers how best to implement MeLSA effectively. So we spend our time supporting MeLSA to explore how their role might be most effective in their individual setting, and we also introduce them to supervision and the importance of supervision. Here's a brief overview of the psychological content of MeLSA. So there's a huge amount of psychology related to learning throughout these 6 days of training. This content was based upon an initial scoping review where educational psychologists, teaching assistants, SENCOs were asked for their views about key areas related to learning. So these ideas were then further investigated by the educational psychologists who created MeLSA, who explored some of the evidence base and the practicality for putting these things into schools. This content has also been refined over time as MeLSA has been delivered numerous times across the country. And we're very aware that this content is by no means supposed to be an exhaustive list of all the psychology related to learning, but it's content that is manageable, consistent, useful, and hopefully impactful as well. So here's an overview now of some of the outcomes of MeLSA. So these outcomes really focus on helping people in the training to understand the psychology of learning, know how to investigate the learning needs of children and young people, and then understand what to do next and how best to support learning in a range of different contexts. So if you'd like to spend a bit more time reading these, then please feel free to pause the video here.
So who is MeLSA training suitable for? Well, MeLSA was designed as an approach to support the learning of all children and young people. And so therefore we would argue that it's suitable for anyone who's working to support learning. So far, we've delivered MeLSA training primarily to teaching assistants and learning support assistants in schools, but we have had interest from teachers and SENCOs to also attend. MeLSA is a framework which can be easily adapted to different learning contexts. So far, we've delivered it to staff working across the age range from early years to post-16, as well as within mainstream and specialist setting contexts. So we're now just going to highlight some key bits of feedback that we've gathered through evaluation and research methods following the delivery of various MeLSA cohorts in Bristol. So the quotes that are up on the screen at the moment in particular highlight the positive impact that MeLSA training and supervision has had on the practice of staff working in schools, as well as the value that's placed on the content and the delivery of the training programme itself. So please feel free to take a moment to pause the video and have a look at some of the quotes from our research. We've also collected evaluative feedback from our recent cohort in Bristol, where 100% of attendees shared that they would recommend the course to a colleague. There were a number of aspects of the training that attendees found to be particularly helpful and useful, and these included those golden threads of mediating a mindset, which Mary mentioned earlier, as well as David when he was talking about the content of the days, as these golden threads run throughout the training. There's also value placed on the focus that we give to investigating thinking skills in different contexts, which help MeLSAs to better understand how a learner learns, and therefore how best that they can support these learners in a variety of different learning contexts. So again, please feel free to pause the video and have a look at this information in a little more depth. So when we think about how MeLSA is implemented in schools, it can be implemented in a variety of different ways. Once you've completed your initial 6 days on the MeLSA training, you'll begin shaping how MeLSA can look in your setting. And this will vary depending on the context of your school, the needs of your learners, the community in which you're placed. So some examples of ways in which MeLSA is becoming embedded within schools and settings has included individual work with struggling learners, using kind of tools and approaches to investigate their skills and foster independence in their learning. Working with individual groups to develop certain targeted skills over a period of time, for example, handwriting, developing growth mindset, working on skills in relation to memory and recall. We've also had MeLSAs who have used their knowledge during whole class work, for example, using different levels of questioning when they're delivering input to whole class in a whole class context, as well as developing growth mindset displays in relation to spelling, which the whole class can access. We've also had MeLSAs who have gone on to share the content of the training with colleagues in schools to help support them to carry out MeLSA work on that wider, broader context. So, for example, we've had MeLSAs who have gone on to implement the 3 Ws within lesson planning across a school. We've also had MeLSAs who have helped train up other members of staff in precision teaching so that this can be utilised across key stages. In terms of the support then that's on offer and available once you've been trained in MeLSA, this is an ongoing commitment for your school and for your setting. So once you've attended the initial 6 days of training in your first year, you'll then continue to be supported to embed the approach in your schools. This will be developed through half-termly group supervision sessions, which will be facilitated by 2 educational psychologists who will be familiar with the MeLSA training course. And the focus will be to support the implementation of the training and the approach in each MeLSA's different context. This will then move in the second year onto supporting MeLSAs to use video as a way of developing their practice through a 1-day conference and then half-termly group supervision sessions. In the following year, the focus will then consider how MeLSAs can work with parents and carers to support them to utilise principles and approaches of MeLSA when they're supporting their child's learning at home.
So there are 4 areas that are really important for school leaders and line managers to consider when thinking about how best to maximise the impact of MeLSA. First of all, who would be the best person or people to attend the training? So MeLSAs promote learning, so they should be really passionate about learning and should want to engage in professional development. MeLSAs need to be good at building learning relationships with children and young people, and they need to be able to work with other people in a supportive, open and collaborative manner. Second of all is about how best to plan support. So MeLSAs are expected to have effective line management from their own educational settings, as this really greatly enhances the impact of the training. And this is best discussed prior to the training between the MeLSAs and their line manager. Third of all is about how best to plan the work after the training's happened. So part of the line manager's role is going to be assisting the identification and prioritisation of learners who would benefit from this MeLSA support. So this can be achieved in consultation with key workers, class teachers, form tutors, heads of year, other professionals, and the MeLSAs themselves. And this is likely going to be an ongoing reflective process. Fourth and finally is the importance of considering consistency. So consistent support gives an important message of being valued, as well as significantly increasing the impact of the training. So educational settings were urged to protect the time for MeLSAs to deliver their support, as inconsistency and a lack of time is likely to result in reduced impact of the MeLSA's work. So MeLSAs also require consistency in their own line management and ongoing supervision. So line management and supervision are really important and should not be seen as something that can be put off or doesn't need to happen. So MeLSA is an investment in learning and it must be seen as an ongoing process to maximise its impact.
How can you find out more about MeLSA? As you can see on screen, a few things have been screenshots, so you can pause the video and find them. The one from the University of London is an academic paper about the psychological foundations of MeLSA. Bottom left are more blogs and access to some videos that have got MeLSA at the heart of it. So that's on the edsci.org.uk. And on the right hand side there, the video hosted by Educational Psychology Reach Out is probably a couple of years old now, but is the what, why, how, and that gives a bit more of a background about how the project was developed and what bits and pieces of legislation and other pieces of research have been drawn on to create MeLSA. So do take the time to explore a bit more. Those are all readily available and they're sort of free on the internet. So do take a look at those if you're interested. It's also important that your educational psychology service do contact them for further information about delivery of MeLSA training in your area. Thank you for listening. We hope that's been helpful and welcome you on the MeLSA journey.